The Prime Minister of Canada emerging from his home to speak with us yet again about his government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's listen in live.
Hello, everyone.
Good morning, everyone.
I want to begin by noting Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. Today, we remember the 6 million innocent Jewish men, women, and children who were systematically murdered by the Nazis. We also pay tribute to the bravery and resilience of survivors and of all of those who risked their lives to save others during the Holocaust. First
of all, I'd like to say that this is Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. Today, we remember the 6 million men and women who were systematically murdered by the Nazis. We are also paying tribute to the courage and resilience of the survivors and all those who risked their lives to save others during the Holocaust.
This morning, I want to again extend my most sincere condolences to the families and friends of the victims of the terrible Nova Scotia attacks. Since yesterday, I've had the chance to speak with Constable Chad Morrison, the RCMP officer who was wounded, as well as Constable Heidi Stevenson's family. On behalf of all Canadians, I thanked them for their service and their sacrifice. Yesterday, when I offered my sympathies to the RCMP officers who support me, I was amazed to see how many of them knew Heidi and had incredibly fond memories of her. They'd worked with her on the musical ride. They remembered her as an extraordinary person. And it really goes to show just how tightly knit not just the RCMP is as a force, but how close we are as a country.
Yesterday, I had a chance to mention to the RCMP officers with me that I wanted to extend my condolences to them, and I was very happy to hear about their stories about her. They served on the carousel with her and told me what an extraordinary person she was. And that made me realize that it's not only about the RCMP being family and connected, but all of us as Canadians being connected.
I visited the Canadian Police and Peace Officers Memorial on Parliament Hill to pay tribute to Constable Stevenson and to recognize the contributions of all law enforcement members to keep us safe. I also spoke to a number of colleagues from Nova Scotia, both past and present, and sought Senator Stan Kutcher's advice, both as a Nova Scotian and as a mental health expert. These calls reinforced what we all know about Nova Scotia, that it's a special place where people stick together and look out for each other. This week, we are all Nova Scotian. The families of the victims can count on the unwavering support not only of their neighbours, but of every single Canadian.
It's now been a number of weeks that we've been asking everyone to follow experts' advice to protect your health and the health of others. The lockdown, the social and physical distancing are an adjustment for most of us. But for some, the consequences of the pandemic are far more profound than a simple adjustment. The virus has had the effect of worsening the inequalities that already existed in our society. The most vulnerable, seniors and young homeless or people without jobs or single-parent families, they are all particularly affected by COVID-19. At the same time, the total number of people who need help to get through this difficult period has also gone up. Well before the pandemic upset our lives, charities were there for our communities. I'm thinking of PEI Rio in Park Extension that helps young people at risk, or an organization in Saint-Michel, in Papineau, as across the country, community organizations are an essential resource for the most vulnerable, and their mission in this pandemic does not change. But they need more support in order to help a large large number of people, an expanding clientele. So the government is putting in place the emergency fund for community support today. This will be an envelope of $350 million to support community organizations and nonprofit organizations. Part of the money will go directly to small independent organizations, and the rest will go through the national organization like the United Way and the Red Cross. This is money that our community leaders will be able to use to train volunteers or increase liveries at home for the seniors or provide transportation services for people with a disability. With this fund, we are giving organizations more resources to adjust to the current realities and difficulties associated with COVID-19.
Charities and nonprofit organizations were doing crucial work to help our communities. Their mission has always been to support people in their time of need, and that hasn't changed. But COVID-19 is putting a tremendous amount of pressure on those organizations because more people need help. For example, back in March, one United Way partner in Winnipeg made and distributed 1,475 emergency kits for families, seniors, and homeless people in just 5 days. Organizations have also had to change the way they deliver services because of the rules that everyone has to follow to keep each other safe. Here in Ottawa, there are a number of organizations that are focused on serving isolated seniors. Usually, they have day programs where seniors can socialize, participate in activities, eat well, and maintain a connection to their community. That's no longer possible because of COVID-19, so organizations are now delivering meals and providing support via phone. In Toronto, Tropicana Community Services is now helping vulnerable youth access their COVID-19 benefits. It takes resources to make these kinds of adjustments, resources these groups don't have because they're spread so thin, trying to help as many people as possible. So to support charities and nonprofits in their important work, our government is setting up a $350 million emergency community support fund. A portion of these funds will go directly to smaller, independent frontline organizations, and the rest will flow through national organizations like the United Way, Community Foundations Canada, and the Red Cross that can get funds to local organizations and vulnerable people quickly. This is money for things like training volunteers, increasing at-home deliveries for seniors, or driving people with disabilities to appointments. With this fund, we're giving more resources to charities and nonprofits so they can adapt to the new realities and difficulties brought on by this pandemic. Notre gouvernement
Our government has introduced a 3-point plan to protect jobs and help people who've lost their jobs, as well as support small businesses that are having cash flow problems. And today, I have other news with respect to the emergency wage subsidy that gives eligible employers up to $847 per week per employee to allow them to keep them on the payroll. We are launching a calculator on the CRA website that will allow businesses to determine exactly what the wage subsidy will cover. Companies will be able to apply starting next Monday, April 27th. Later today, the President of the Treasury Board, Jean-Yves Duclos, will provide additional details with respect to the deployment of this program.
Is also helping business owners and entrepreneurs adapt to a new reality with the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. This new measure gives qualifying employers up to $847 per employee each week so they can keep people on the payroll. Today, we're launching a new calculator on the CRA website so businesses can determine the amount they can expect to claim through the wage subsidy. Employers will be able to apply as of this Monday, April 27th. Later today, Minister Duclos will be providing more details regarding the rollout of this program. And I want to turn now to some encouraging news on the innovation front. Our supercluster initiative brings together small, medium-sized, and large companies, academic institutions, and not-for-profit organizations to generate bold ideas and innovate. So a few weeks ago, the Digital Technology Supercluster challenged its network of over 500 firms to come up with solutions to help Canadians get through this pandemic. They received over 300 submissions, and they are now moving forward on a number of key projects. Toronto's DNA Stack is developing a new cloud-based network that allows researchers who are looking to improve our ability to diagnose and treat COVID-19 to share their findings. Another company, FoodX, is working with its partners to develop an e-grocery management system to make sure our healthcare workers, seniors, and others have access to fresh food during this crisis. Canadian innovators are among the best in the world, and it's great to see so many of them use their talents to help our communities. This is yet another example of what we can achieve when we work together as Team Canada. Cette semaine,
this week and in the coming weeks, you can count on us to continue to find other ways to help you. We will continue to do our part just like you continue to do yours. It's been almost 6 weeks that you've been at home, that you've been regularly washing your hands, and that you've been keeping a 2-meter distance from others. A month and a half is a long time. But your efforts are now bearing fruit. We're seeing early signs, but positive signs that we're moving in the right direction. And this is in large part thanks to you. So let's all continue to follow the experts' advice. And together, we will get there.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now go to the phone lines for questions. Just one question, one follow-up. Over to you, Operator.
Thank you. Merci. First question, Christy Kirkup, The Globe and Mail. Line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. How will you help millions of Canadians who now find themselves without medical benefits during a global pandemic?
We know that the way we get through this particular crisis is by pulling together and making sure those who are most vulnerable get the support they need to stay healthy, to stay isolated, and get through this. That's key, not just to remain true to our values in protecting people, including the most vulnerable, but it's also key to being able to recover quickly once we're through this pandemic. That's why we continue to work with partners across the country to highlight gaps and challenges and things we need to do more to help people afford cost of living that is in many cases going up because of this crisis. We will continue to work with partners to make sure we're getting that help out there. Nous reconnaissons que pendant cette pandémie,
we know that in the midst of this pandemic, there are many people who are suffering and who need help, and that's why we have put in place new measures that will help many, many people. But we also recognize that there are other people who need more help, and that's why we're working with our partners, with people right across the country and other levels of government to help people get through these difficult times so that we can come back very strong once this pandemic is over.
Millions of Canadians are finding themselves, though, without medical benefits because they have been laid off. And Dr. Eric Hoskins has said that Ottawa could cover the cost of the provinces and territories bringing Canadians into their formularies as an interim step to help. Is this something your government is willing to do?
We're going to continue to work with all sorts of experts and smart folks making recommendations from across the country in different ways to make sure we're doing everything we need to help Canadians through this crisis. We're always looking for more things to do, and we will continue to do the things that need to be done in order to help Canadians.
Thank you. Next question, Operator.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Michel Lamarche, TVA Nouvelles. À vous.
Good morning. With respect to the wage subsidy, I gather that it will be possible to apply starting Monday, but can you tell us, Mr. Trudeau, when companies that apply will actually receive money in order to pay their employees? The reality is that during this crisis, people need help almost immediately, and we need to be able to deliver that help as quickly as possible. We realized that the wage subsidy was going to take a bit of time to be delivered, and we're still working on that. As you say, people will start to be able to apply on Monday, and we do hope that we can get the money to them quickly after that, but it will take a number of days at the very least. And that's why we wanted to ensure that people would have access to credit. Businesses, small businesses, large corporations would have access to credit in order to get through these times. The money is coming. The online calculator will also allow companies to see exactly how much money they will be receiving from the government in the coming weeks, and therefore they can make the necessary, do the necessary borrowing now.
We recognize the need for support as quickly as possible, and that's why we're working extremely hard to get help out to people. We started with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, which has now helped over 8 million people across this country and made a significant difference. But we also want people to get we want other people to get the emergency wage subsidy, which means working with businesses to keep people on the payroll through this so that they can not only retain a job, but have a job to get back quickly to as soon as the economy picks up again. We have announced that on Monday people will be able to register for this online. As of today, however, they can see what the amount they are likely to be able to get through this and be confident in their ability to access credit from banks, from agencies like BDC and EDC, to be able to support people right now in this time of need. We're moving as quickly as we can. We move very quickly on the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. We hope to be able to get this help out to businesses to keep employees on their payroll as quickly as possible.
Follow up? Mr. Trudeau, quickly, what does that mean? Will it go as quickly as the CERB for the wage subsidy? Or should we expect it to take longer, perhaps a week or 2 weeks before the money starts to circulate? Minister Duclos will have more to say about that in a couple of hours, but I can tell you that people at the Canada Revenue Agency are working very hard right now to deliver that money to businesses as quickly as possible after the registration. Now, it will take a bit of time, but people should know that they will be getting that money and should not hesitate to access credit from banks and our other institutions like BDC and EDC.
Merci. Prochaine question. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Charlie Pinkerton, iPolitics. Line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Yesterday, Public Safety Minister Bill Blair said he intends to introduce stricter gun laws as soon as possible, and you said your government was on the verge of introducing an assault rifle ban before the pandemic caused Parliament to suspend. Will a gun control bill be introduced in the restricted version of Parliament that we see during the pandemic, or will it have to wait until Parliament returns to normal sittings?
Obviously, we are all reeling from the tragedy in Nova Scotia, and our focus right now is on supporting those families as quickly as possible and as well as we possibly can. On gun control legislation, we made strong commitments to move forward with that rapidly. As you mentioned, we were on the verge of bringing it in before Parliament was suspended through COVID-19, and we're now looking at the right way and the right moment to bring it forward. The tragedy in Nova Scotia simply reinforces and underlines how important it is for us to continue to move forward on strengthening gun control in this country, and we will do that at the appropriate time. Okay.
The tragedy in Nova Scotia makes it clear just how important it is to continue to move forward with gun control. We made commitments to move quickly on this, and we were on the verge of introducing new measures to restrict assault-type weapons in Canada before Parliament was suspended because of COVID-19. And now we are looking at what the right time will be to reintroduce that bill. But we will take the necessary time to ensure we do things properly.
So which of your government's promised gun control measures will it be that it introduces first? Will it be the assault rifle ban or something else, perhaps influenced by what happened over the weekend?
The legislation on the assault rifle ban was almost ready to go when the Parliament suspended. So I expect that'll be the first measures we bring forward. But of course, as we learn more about this terrible, terrible tragedy in Nova Scotia, we will keep reflecting on ways that we need to help Canadians stay safe in their communities, in their homes, and across the country.
Thank you. One more question on the phone, please, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. À vous.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. I'd like to come back to a question you were asked yesterday during the question period in the House about 3 planes that were to come back to Canada full of medical equipment from China, and that came back empty. Can you tell us more about that? I received more information about that. There was one plane that was supposed to be bringing in equipment for Canada. Another was bringing in equipment for a specific province that they had ordered. And there are very strict limits on how much these Chinese aircraft are allowed to stay in Canada, and there are huge delays when it comes to bringing in the equipment from the airport. Unfortunately, the planes had to take off without having received their cargo, but we continue to work tirelessly to deliver that equipment. We've received a great deal of equipment in recent days. We are expecting more equipment in the coming days, and up until now, we have been able to respond to the province's need every step of the way. Although I understand it's difficult for people to hear that when they're working in our healthcare system, but we will continue to ensure that we deliver all the necessary equipment to them.
We have I got more information on the issues around the two planes that landed empty yesterday. One was a Government of Canada charter. The other was chartered by a specific province for one of their orders. There are severe restrictions on the ground in China in terms of how long a plane can actually stay in their airports before having to leave, whether it's full or not. And at the same time, supply lines and truck shipments to the airports are difficult and interrupted by checkpoints and quarantine measures. For the most part, we've been able to navigate through those and ensure that Canada has received the equipment that it needs, but these two airplanes were forced to take off empty. We will continue to work through a very difficult situation to ensure that, as we have been, we make sure that Canadians get, Canadian provinces, Canadian institutions get the equipment that they so desperately need. We're continuing to receive millions of pieces of PPE over the past days. We expect many more over the over the next days and weeks, as well as the Canadian industrial facilities tooling up their ability to deliver PPEs. It's always a challenge to get the PPE into Canada in a time where the global market is very, very competitive for these. But we have managed so far to get the equipment that provinces have asked for, and we will continue to make sure we're prioritizing support for our frontline workers who are going into battle every day against this virus.
Follow up? So what happened to that equipment, Mr. Trudeau? Is it still in our possession in storage somewhere, or? And what is the other province that was expecting this equipment? Well, we will continue to follow up on the orders that were placed and ensure that we receive the equipment we need. And we will continue to ensure that we have chartered planes there to pick up the equipment we require. With respect to the province, I will let the province share that information with you.
Hi, Prime Minister. Molly Thomas, CTV National News. I want to ask you a question on behalf of Nick Beaton, who lost his wife, Kristen, from the senseless violence in Nova Scotia this weekend. He just spoke with our chief anchor, Lisa LaFlamme. His wife, Kristen, died. She was a frontline worker, a dedicated nurse, and was also pregnant. And she was forced to reuse her personal protective equipment because there was not enough. So on behalf of Nick, let me ask you this question. Why aren't there enough PPEs for nurses and other healthcare workers, not only in Nova Scotia, but across the country? And where is the supply chain broken, and what are we going to do about it?
First of all, to Nick and to all the families going through heart-wrenching loss right now, looking for answers, looking for reasons, looking for support. We are there for you, and we will be there for you. Like so many people across the country who are worried about what the next days will bring and what the challenges are facing. Our frontline workers have been worried about the continued availability of personal protection equipment. We've seen a number of provinces talk about possible shortages, a number of days away. We've managed to cover those, but we are in a situation where people are having to make choices to try and stretch out our PPE as long as possible. Different provinces are managing their stockpiles differently. The federal government is there to support provinces in their requests, and until this point up until this point and beyond this point, have been able to respond to the specific requests that provinces have made. At the same time, we have been fighting in a very competitive international environment where everyone is looking for PPE, which is why we've made significant investments in domestic capacity to make the kinds of equipment that is going to keep frontline health workers safe across the country.
First of all, I want to express my deepest condolences to Nick and all those people in Nova Scotia who have lost loved ones because of this terrible tragedy in Nova Scotia. This is something that people are having a hard time understanding, and we want you to know that we will be there for all the families suffering at this time. Now, with respect to our healthcare workers who are concerned about having the necessary protective equipment, the provinces are responsible for managing their protocols and their equipment, and as a government, we will always be there and have always been there to respond to any requests from the provinces for PPE. Now, we've heard provinces say a couple of times, well, we're 3 days away from being completely out of this piece of equipment or that piece of equipment, but every single time we avoided shortages, and provinces were able to extend the availability of their protective equipment. But we're working very hard at the national and international level in an environment that's become extremely competitive in terms of getting that PPE. Up until now, we have succeeded in filling all the necessary orders from the provinces, and we realized that we had to develop a domestic capacity to produce that equipment. And that's why I'm so pleased to be seeing all those Canadian companies that have stepped up to produce the necessary equipment, and that equipment will be available very soon.
Minister, you said there that you've been able to deliver personal protective equipment to what the provinces have needed, but isn't the supply chain broken if a pregnant nurse has to reuse masks and gloves?
These are decisions that are taken by provinces on how they extend and how they require the use of PPE. Different provinces have different burn rates in terms of use of PPE. We have worked as a federal government to ensure that when provinces have made requests of us for more personal protective equipment, we've been able to deliver what was needed. These are things that we're fighting for every single day, and we want everyone to be able to have the equipment they need.
The provinces make their own decisions with respect to their healthcare system and the use of personal protective equipment. Our responsibility as the federal government is to be there to support the provinces and be able to help meet their needs. And thus far, in most cases, we've been able to meet those needs. But of course, we must continue to do everything we can.
Global National Prime Minister, when you were talking about the gun control legislation, you brought up the tragedy in Nova Scotia. I wanted to know if you've been briefed on what kind of gun or guns were used in Nova Scotia. Do we know that they were legal? And based on that, how would your proposed gun control legislation have potentially prevented this shooting?
There is still a tremendous investigation going on by the RCMP right now. There are many, many different sites, many different questions that a lot of people have, and I'm going to trust the RCMP on releasing information as they feel it is important to.
But with regards to the gun control, why are you joining the two?
We have gun control legislation ready to move forward on. We were almost ready to move forward on it a number of weeks ago. We continue to see it as a priority. We had every intention and have every intention of continuing to move forward on it when things restore to order. It did not need or take this tragedy for us to be committed to gun control. We've long been committed to it. This is just another tragic reminder of the fact that we need to do more to keep Canadians safe.
And sorry, just as my follow-up, is on the World Health Organization, Ireland had said it's going to quadruple funding for the WHO, and Australia and the UK are calling for an independent investigation into China's handling of the crisis. All of them are Canadian allies. So is Canada going to up our contribution to the WHO, and are we going to be calling for an investigation?
We have been increasing our contribution to the WHO in order to deal with this pandemic. We fund them to the tune of tens of millions of dollars a year. At the same time, we do need to find answers to how this happened, so we understand how to ensure that it never happens again, and that is certainly something Canada is going to be part of. Okay.
We continue to contribute to the World Health Organization. This is an important institution, particularly in a pandemic. But we will have to get some answers in order to better protect ourselves as a country and as a planet, so that we're better prepared for the next potential pandemic.
We've seen outbreaks of COVID-19 at meatpacking plants in Alberta. Should Canadians be concerned about the security of their food supply chain, and what more can the government do to protect that supply chain?
We've heard from Canadian beef producers and associations that the priority will be ensuring Canadian supply before they move to exporting. Much of our beef is exported, but right now the priority will be on domestic supply. So we are not at this point anticipating shortages of beef, but prices might go up. We will, of course, be monitoring that very, very carefully. At the same time, we know that it is extremely important to do everything we can to keep Canadians safe, to keep workers in all industries across this country, essential or not, as safe as we possibly can, and I'm pleased to see measures being taken to reflect on how to keep people safe. Okay.
The reality is that a meat processing plant has prioritized deliveries to the Canadian market. There may be lower exports in that case, but we want to ensure that our supply chain for beef products is functioning. The reality is that there may be higher prices, but we will be monitoring that closely. But the important thing in all of this is to ensure that we are protecting the workers in essential and other industries, protecting them from COVID-19, and we must take the necessary measures to keep them safe.
And on oil prices, is there going to be further support for the oil industry? And beyond that, will there be support for provinces that rely heavily on oil revenues and that might need help with their finances, their debt, to recover from this downturn?
Our focus from the beginning has been on helping Canadians, families, workers across this country, and we have put in place significant measures that have an impact on all industries, including the oil industry, with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit and the wage subsidy, which have helped thousands of workers across Alberta, across the oil sector in this country. We've moved forward on other measures as well to help out that sector specifically, and we're always open to working more on helping particular industries or particular areas that need support to get through this COVID-19 crisis. We will continue those discussions. On supporting provinces, we recognize that various provinces are facing real challenges in terms of cash crunches, in terms of liquidity, and our Department of Finance and others are engaged closely with different provinces on challenges that they're facing specifically.
Bonjour, Philippe Vincent-Fauzi de Radio-Canada.
Now, earlier in your speech, you said there were some positive signs, and I wonder what those positive signs are, in your opinion. And on the wage subsidy, can you assure us that not $1 of taxpayer money will go to companies that have money in tax havens? Well, in terms of encouraging signs, when we look at the pandemic curves and the numbers in terms of the spread of COVID-19, we can see that there has been a decline in the numbers. Now, we see the numbers going up in certain parts of the country, but there are fewer and fewer cases each day, and we hope that what this means is that the measures we've been taking are now helping, and are now helping the expected outcome. But at the same time, we need to keep those measures in place, because if we relax them too soon, we could end up in a situation where COVID-19 would ramp up again, and this is not something we want to see happen. In terms of our approach in helping businesses, we have always been focused on help for workers. We did not want to judge whether someone working for a small hardware store or for a large international hardware chain would be treated differently. We wanted to ensure that workers and families that depend on that income would have the necessary help. And that's why we moved forward with the wage subsidy, and we are also moving forward now with the emergency response benefit. I'd also like to say that we are always working hard to fight tax havens and tax avoidance. We have taken very strong measures to try and recover that money and impose serious consequences on companies that take advantage of those tax havens, and we will continue to do that.
Yeah. As I've said a couple of times, I think there is reason for cautious optimism. We're hearing that from medical officers across the province, across the country, noting that the increase in cases is getting smaller every day in many places, that we're still seeing more cases every day, but fewer than in previous days, which is a sign that our efforts are working. We are continuing to do the right things as a country that is getting this virus under control. However, we need to continue to do those things, because as soon as we loosen up, if we loosen up too quickly or if we're not careful, we could see a return spike of COVID-19 that would be problematic for citizens and for the economic recovery. So we're going to focus on making sure we're doing things very, very carefully, but it is encouraging to see that the things Canadians are doing from coast to coast to coast to help each other out, to stay safe, are working. That's why we need to continue them.
Juste pour comprendre sur les paradis
Now,
fiscaux,
just to understand with respect to tax havens, you didn't really answer my question. Can you tell Canadians today that the money that you paid in taxes will not go to companies that have accounts in tax havens? Can you assure us of that today, or can you not assure us of that today? We are helping workers right across this country. Someone who works for a company whose family depends on that job and who has lost that job needs help, needs to be able to pay for groceries or pay rent. And it is for that reason that we decided we needed to help people, whether it's a small company or a big company. We are helping workers who need that support. Now, with respect to tax evasion and tax avoidance, we will continue to fight that sort of action, and the choices made by some companies who refuse to pay their fair share of taxes. We have invested more than $1 billion in the Canada Revenue Agency so that we have more tools available to us to target those companies.
Merci tout le monde.
We now join the following program in progress.